What's going on, guys? Bingo here, and I want to bring you guys my Invoked deck profile for the May 2019 format. So this format is extremely defined. It's basically the same format we had previous to the ban list, but the only difference is we have a couple additional cards from Dark Neostorm that added a couple rogue decks to the format, as well as made a previous like tier 1.5, tier 2 deck, that being Orcust, into the main stage. So Invoked is a deck that I've always held pretty close to my heart. It's the second deck I got my invite with, and I very much enjoy it. It's always had a lot of problems, being that it loses to just about every hand trap in the format. So this deck, or this version of the deck, is trying to fix those issues as best as it can. They'll never be totally mitigated, but this is my version of Invoke that I'm planning on taking to my next regional in here about a week or two. So this is a competitive list. It's not very budget friendly. There's a lot of expensive cards in here. But if you want a template for the most competitive version of the deck that you can play, I recommend starting here and make changes according to your play style. This is a going second based list. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump right into the list, okay? So starting off with the main deck, we have 3 Alistair the Invoker. This is the heart and soul of the deck. So the main issue with Invoked, like I said, is it's a normal summon based deck that loses to Effect Veiler, Ash Blossom, Invocation King, Ghost Beld if you don't have Magical Meltdown on the field. Really, the only hand trap it doesn't lose to is Ghost Ogre, and even then, Ghost Ogre is one of the best outs to Makaba. So it has a ton of inherent flaws, but Alistair the Invoker is a 1-card engine. You play 8 of them in the deck because Terraforming is at 2, and it's just very consistent strategy. It's not the most powerful, being able to summon 1 to 2 boss monsters per turn, but this deck can compete on a semi-competitive level. So the only reason we do that is this supplemental engine being the Mech Knight. So Mech Knight Invoked has been around for a long time now. 3 Purple Nightfall, you should never run less than 3. This card is fantastic at gaining advantage the longer the game goes on, as well as 2,500 on a basically free monster is nothing to scoff at. Followed by 2 Mech Knight Blue Sky, and then 1 Indigo Eclipse. So I did mess around with 3 Mech Knight Blue Sky on more than one occasion. I was playing 3 back when Ibli was relatively common. For your opponent to end their turn with Ibli on your side of the field is like a little bit after Spiral format, but it's kind of a brick because you can't gain any advantage unless your opponent is playing the game. That's why this going second list, you'll almost always have access to this card, but seeing it in multiples really is not the best thing, and you always want 1 in your deck to search out if possible. So that's why we play 2, and Indigo Eclipse is just the best of the worst Mech Knight, so we always play it for the same reason. For hand traps, I'm playing 3 Effect Veiler. The reason I'm playing 3 Veiler is it's not once per turn and it's a light. I did mess around with Gamma, but Gamma banishing itself when it leaves the field because no one's going to clear it really did conflict with making Makaba. As weird as that sounds, you're playing 3 Gamma and 1 Driver, but it does come up a lot where you don't have a light target because unless your opponent played a Veiler, your Gamma is banished, so you don't really have any targets left. So 3 Veiler, and then I am playing 2 Ash Blossom and 1 Ghost Ogre. So 1 Ghost Ogre was kind of the odd off 40th card, and I opted to play this instead of a few other things, but I opted to play this because with the next card, Phantasme, it lets you draw into multiple interactions without them being a hard once per turn. So that's why you're playing the Veilers as well as the 2 Ash Blossom, because you're trying to stun your opponent and then OTK, so you really can't be bogged down with all these once per turn effects, or else it really does slow your game down enough to the point where your opponent will have another turn to counterplay. So we're trying to avoid that as best we can. And then, like I just mentioned, 3 Fantastical Dragon Phantasme. This card is amazing for protecting Alistair, putting immediate pressure on your opponent, and sometimes digging 4 or 5 cards in your deck to draw into your the additional outs that you have main decked in this strategy. So it's a great card. It did help out a lot. Unfortunately, it is a dark attribute, and we are playing Kaliga, but it's not the most ideal, fusion to make with your invocation, but it does come up and it does have its purposes, but I'll get into that when we get to the extra deck. Then we have our 3 Magical Meltdown. This is a staple for any invocation or any invoke deck. This card is really good because they can't Ash or they can't respond to your invocation. I know you can't Ash invocation, but Ghost Bell does have its play, as well as if you are playing the Shaddoll variant. That's why I said Ash. They can't Ash your Shaddoll fusion, which is really, it's pretty convenient when you're trying to summon your construct. 2 terraforming, pretty standard. And then I did opt for 2 invocation. So I mess around with between 2 and 3 all the time, but this card, as good as it is, if you do open one, that's it. You just want to open one. You can't afford to have 2 out of the 4 cards be basically dead in your hand, because if you do open 2, then you're going to normal summon your Alistair, because you always have at least 2 Alistair in your hand. You're normal summon it, search the 3rd, so that's 4 out of your 6 cards. You're not going to have enough gas in the tank to break your opponent's board. So worst case scenario, you open both and you normal summon your Alistair and you can't search one. I know it does have its drawbacks, but the percentage of opening 2 is extremely low, so you're just going to have to take that gamble. And then we're playing 1 Book of the Law for the OTK. I did mess around with it without playing this card, but it just comes up too much where you are just short of being able to OTK your opponent, and being able to search this instead of an additional invocation for a follow-up play is just too important. 3 Desires. So I've seen quite a few lists not playing this card, and I don't understand why. Yes, I am only playing 2 invocation, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to play 3. But sometimes you just have to gamble. It's a very, very small chance you're going to banish all of your invocations, but getting that additional resource, drawing into the power non-searchable spell cards that you're playing, is extremely important for this strategy. So like I was saying, Invoked loses to every hand trap in existence, so we're playing 3 Called by the Grave to mitigate that. Unfortunately, it doesn't stop impermanence. Playing a go in second strategy, so we're playing 3 Mind Control. This helps us access our extra deck monsters easier. It helps us do quite a bit, and there's some pretty crazy game states that come up because you're playing with your opponent's monsters. It's kind of similar to Sky Striker, but not that extreme. But this card does out problem cards by itself. It forces negates. This card is just fantastic for the Invoke strategy. Unfortunately, it doesn't fit that well in other decks because Invoke just uses your opponent's monsters in a lot different way than other decks do, being able to fuse them away and link. Every deck can link them away, but you just have the utility. So we're playing 3 Twin Twisters because this is a going second strategy, and Sky Striker is still a deck, Salaman Great still a deck with their set Roar, Rage, Called by the Grave, whatever have you. Getting your Alistair Called by the Grave on invocation is probably one of the worst feelings that you have, so you want to force those early. And then this just outs Mystic Mine if you happen to run into it. So the next card is the newly semi-limited Super Polymerization. This card is nuts. This is one of the main reasons I wanted to play the deck, because it can abuse this card a lot more than other decks can. And like I said, some of the game states you get put into because of just the wacky card pool you're playing it's a lot of fun. I haven't really been enjoying the game lately, but this deck has me basically reinvigorated and looking forward to seeing what my opponent does, seeing if I can break the board, because this deck has a ton of power, and it also, its power level is very weird because it's extremely powerful. If you open certain cards in other hands, it's just like make Macabre pass. But this version of the deck, you'll be able to break your opponent's board more often than that, and that's why I'm enjoying it. So going into the extra deck, we'll start off with the Link monsters. We have Alistair, the Invoker of Madness. This card is great for the archetype. I really wish you didn't have to discard, but that would just make the strategy a little bit too competitive. I guess Konami doesn't want it to be. It always wants Invoked to be on the rogue tier. So unfortunately, you do have to discard, which means you'll have less cards for Macabre negates or other things. But hey, that's just what we got. So one Underclock Taker. Underclock into Purgatrio is a fantastic combo. That just puts so much pressure on your opponent because it can clear the entire field by itself, and by then they probably took a ton of damage, and then you got Underclock Taker and probably a Mech Knight on field. The Underclock Purgatrio combo just ends games by itself. And then we have Nightmare Phoenix, just generic outs to back row or any problem card you want to force before you actually start making your plays. That's it for the Link 2s. For the Link 3s, we got Nightmare Unicorn, same thing as Phoenix, really. It outs Colossus, it outs back row. You can Link Climb and just start popping your opponent's cards before you go in for the OTK. For the Link 4s, we're actually playing Boral Sword and Borreload. This is kind of a flex spot in the extra deck. I debated on playing Avramax. I debated on playing a few other cards, but I just felt like there are some game states where you can't win with Boral Sword, and really the best play is to take your opponent's monster. It's usually against Thunder Dragons this comes up, but being able to take a Colossus and kind of put pressure on that way is very, very valuable for the deck. So that's why I went with Borreload, okay? So for the fusions, we play one Invoked Kaliga. Getting your opponent down to only being able to activate one monster effect is actually extremely valuable. If you clear a board and you just can't quite kill them and you still have the ability to fuse, setting this up alongside a Macabre, which is a game state that's possible. You know, it says your opponent can only attempt to activate one monster effect, so if you negate it with Macabre, they're done. They have to swing over Kaliga before they can continue, and that's probably not going to happen. So we are playing 2 Macabre. That flex spot for Borreload, I did consider playing 3 of this thing, but it doesn't come up that often. I'm not saying it doesn't in the grind game, but the other utility cards in your extra deck come up way more often than a third Macabre, so that's why I chose to only play 2. And then I am playing 2... Yeah, there it is. 2 Purgatrio. I was a very, very big advocate of only playing one of this thing, but your plays do get stopped, and you really just want follow-on pressure if the game does go more than your first turn, so that you actually have that additional follow-up play. Now we are going with the 1 Magellanica for the OTK with Alistair, the Invoker of Madness. And then our super poly targets are Dragos. This is actually supposed to be Mud Dragon. I messed it up. But alright, so pretend this Dragos Stapelia is Mud Dragon. Mud Dragon's just way more generic than Dragos Stapelia, and that card is phenomenal against the Thunder Dragon matchup. But you can clear the same monsters with Mud Dragon. So it kind of depends on what you're looking to do. It has a little bit more utility, but Mud Dragon's way more generic. And then Starving Venom, Fusion Dragon, and Salamangreat, Violet Chimera, those are meta calls. If you're tight on space because you're playing the Sky Striker build or whatever, you can definitely cut down to 2 super poly targets or even 1. Mud Dragon might be enough, but I've been in games where it's just you can't summon Mud Dragon, but you can summon Starving Venom or Violet Chimera, so it's all up to you. Alright, that's it for the extra deck. And then for the side deck, we have a kind of localized side deck. Now, most of these cards I'm going to be playing at the regional I go to, but I'll let you know the ones that I'm playing because of my local scene. So 3 red reboot, it lets you win games against back row decks. There's nothing really to say about it. Almost every hand you can OTK no problem, so shutting down all the traps and just going for game is extremely easy. Artifact Lancia for your Thunder Dragon matchup and your Orcus matchup. So Phantasme and Mud Dragon be able to protect your Alistair if you super poly it. Like, those are good ways to protect Alistair against like fog blades and other forms of targeting negation, but sometimes it's not enough. So you just want to be able to stun your opponent so that you can actually make a play and just hopefully they don't get another turn. Dino Wrestler Pankratops, because Floodgates are still in the game. I know this doesn't out Mystic Mine, so one of these could be a Typhoon because your Pendulum matchup's really not that good. As well as Mystic Mine, you're only out to it as Twin Twisters with this version of the deck. So I don't know, Pankratops is extremely powerful. I'm kind of disrespecting Mystic Mine right now. I know it is a real deck, but you know, sometimes you just have to take your losses to certain matchups and make your other matchups better for it. So 3 Chalice. I wanted to play Impermanence. It just conflicts with Phantasmate too much. This outs your Goliath, your Colossus, whatever problem monster effect that you're needing to deal with prior to making your plays. This just deals with it. And then I'm playing 3 DD Crow, Salamangreat matchup, and you know, some extent your Sky Striker matchup. It's just a good card all around. So guys, that's my May 2019 Invoked deck profile. If you've enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. If you have something you want to say, if you want to start a conversation, leave a comment down below. I'll see you guys next time.